I show that we are at 7:01, and with that, I think I'll go ahead. Hello all, good to see everyone arriving. While we're getting settled here, I think we'll go ahead and have a message from our sponsor, Glass Tire, and then we'll take off. Okay, thank you to Glass Tire for their continued support and to all of you for joining us tonight. I'm Terry Thornton, Curator of Education at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth. Welcome to Being There, Tuesday Evenings with the Modern, the museum's online alternative to the long-running lecture series Tuesday Evenings at the Modern. Each week for this special program, a guest curator, someone who has participated in the Tuesday evening program in the past, invites someone within the art world who they find compelling to give that evening's presentation. This is followed by a Q&A generated by you. So as the presentation proceeds, you can type your questions by accessing the Zoom's Q&A tab at the bottom of the screen there. And in the end, the speakers will entertain as many questions as time allows. Tonight's curator is the artist Lauren Woods, who, as seen here, participated in Tuesday Evenings in November 2015, and again as part of Reading Monuments, a series of panels in October 2018, and then again in March 2019. I appreciate Lauren accepting my proposal for tonight's format and for her extending an invitation to Mendi and Keith Obadike. I hope I got that right. I keep practicing it. Look, they're nodding. I got it right. Obadike, who Lauren will now take over and introduce. Thank you, Lauren.
Good evening. So it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's Being There guests, conceptual artists Mendi and Keith Obadike. The brilliant interdisciplinary art practice of Mendi and Keith Obadike, a collaboration that spans almost 25 years, is one that includes video and sound works, literature, and public art. Collectively, it forms a body that explores social and cultural systems in relation to Blackness and technoculture. Their intermedia work has been shown both nationally and internationally, commissioned by and exhibited at venues such as the New York African Film Festival, Electronic Arts Intermix, Rhizome, the New Museum, Whitechapel Gallery in London, the Studio Museum in Harlem, the Met, and the MoMA in New York, to name a few. They have contributed sonically to projects by a wide range of artists, including loops for soul singer D'Angelo's first album and a score for playwright Anna Devere Smith at the Lincoln Center Institute. Amongst many honors, Mendi and Keith were invited to develop their first opera masquerade by writer Toni Morrison at her Princeton atelier. This project, For Electric Ghosts, was later commissioned by The Kitchen and listed in Art Forum's Best of the Year. Mendi Obadike was born in Palo Alto, California. She received a BA in English from Spelman College and a PhD in literature from Duke University. She is a poetry editor at Fence Magazine and an assistant professor in the Department of Humanities and Media Studies at Pratt Institute. Keith Obadike was born in Nashville, Tennessee. He received a BA in art from North Carolina Central University and an MFA in sound design from Yale University. He is an associate professor in the College of Arts and Communication at William Patterson University. Now, I've been following Mendi and Keith, well, really lurking since the mid-2000s as an art student. Back then, this was an exercise of not being there. I was only able to experience the residue of their work through others' interpretations and discourses, or as an archive of gestures performed in virtual public space. But even the mediated experience of their work left me fascinated. How could it not? As artists, they helped to develop the genre of net art. Their conceptual internet practice produced some of the first internet artworks that dispelled the digital utopianism that was bubbling up and inserted a much needed critical race analysis into the emerging field. As an emerging artist exploring culture and socio-political subjects through new media, being introduced to their artistic practices in publications like INCA, the Journal of Contemporary African Art, was like a lighthouse beacon in my contemporary art education, which was an education that had to be self-supplemented due to an art world that continually centered practices by white artists. Today, 15 years later, my experience of their work has changed, maybe very little, even as they've moved from URL space to IRL spaces. Facebook and Google has made it easier for me to witness the practice of these amazing artists, but I have never been able to actually be there in the right time, at the right place to experience their work IRL or in real life. And yet and still, my fascination remains at the same intensity. In fact, I would say the frequency is actually turned up more. The need to know, understand, and experience their work feels more urgent. Their explorations of Black ontology that I see in announcements or in write-ups or documentation feels like a North Star, leading to a safe space in the cybernetic wilderness of these United States. So when Terry asked me to guest curate tonight's lecture, it was an easy task because selfishly, I saw this as an opportunity to finally be there or be here, even as virtual bodies in virtual space, with Mendi and Keith to hear and learn from these prolific artists. Please join me in welcoming Mendi and Keith Obadike to our beloved Dallas-Fort Worth institution, Tuesday evenings at the Modern. And if I had emoji claps, I could do it, so.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for
Thank
that
you.
really, really warm welcome.
That was so kind and generous.
Yes, and thank you, Terry and Amy and John, for bringing us and supporting us this far in our visit.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's always nice to be invited anywhere, but it's really nice when, like, you know, we're already a fan of the series. We realize, like, we've seen other, fantastic presentations, and, we love Lauren's work. And so, like, to be invited by artists that we care about and, for a series that we're already engaged with, it's an honor. So thank you. We're happy to be here. So we're gonna talk about some past projects, and we'll get to what we're currently working on. This will be really informal. I mean, maybe Zoom requires that, I don't know. We'll definitely take questions at the end, but if people have questions as we're going, we're happy to take questions about specific projects as we're talking through things.
Yeah. If we see them.
Yeah.
We're going to say a few things about our work over in general first, and then we'll talk about things that kind of go across 4 series. Not all the things in the series, but just examples of the series. As Lauren said, we've been working together for 24 years. And we're particularly interested in the power of listening and how sound articulates space. And we mean both architectural space and social space. So that's something that runs through all of our projects. There are 3 ideas that they don't tell us what the projects are going to be about, but we notice that these ideas that we have about listening kind of run through our projects as well. Often because we're working in a visual art space, the kind of relationship to looking is a question. And so one of the things we notice is that when we look, we're not just using our eyes, we're also, what we see and what we think also informs, what we hear and what we think also informs what we see. The second idea is that the way we make meaning of sounds is slightly different from the way we make meaning of images. And so one of the main ways that we make meaning of sounds is in relation to an image. And then the last idea is that even when we don't have an image present to stabilize our listening, we have other things like memory and feeling. And so we think we make meaning by calling up other times that listening has helped us feel or has helped us understand something. So these are kind of ideas that come along with our work.
So we'll start by talking about a series of projects that we call the Americana Suites. And these are works that deal with sort of key moments in American history. For us, these projects are interdisciplinary projects. They often involve video, sound installations. We're often producing books from these projects. Sometimes they involve performances. And these projects are often site-specific. So we'll start out talking about a project from 2012 called American Cipher. Now, American Cipher was commissioned by Bucknell University. And then we later showed the project at the Studio Museum in Harlem. Let me just bring up an image from the project so you can see a little bit of what we're talking about here. Now, at the center of this project was the story of Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings. So, many of you may already know this story. Sally Hemings was a woman who was enslaved by Thomas Jefferson. She was owned by the Jefferson family, and she had children with Thomas Jefferson. And so many years, the relationship between the Jefferson and Hemings family, there were questions about, was there a relationship? Were these families one family? And then in the late 90s, DNA evidence proved that there was indeed a connection between these families. The image that you see here is a bell that belonged to Sally Hemings. So at the time when we did this project, it was the one item belonging to Sally Hemings that was on display when you visited Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's plantation.
It was the last known surviving item that she owned.
And interestingly, this bell, while it was on display at Monticello, it was owned by Howard University, historically Black university in Washington, D.C. And so when we did the project, we went into Monticello. We did a lot of research on these families, and we became obsessed with this bell, and we really wanted to ring the bell, and so we made a bunch of calls, and we found some people who could put us in touch with Howard University, and they gave us permission to use the bell, and Monticello signed off on it too. Interestingly, they're more concerned about what we would do with images of the bell. They were fine with us ringing the bell, but they were really concerned with what we would do with the images. So we used this bell to make a sound installation, along with using DNA from the Jefferson and Hemings family to sort of score a sound piece. So John, could you play the first video for us? File number 1. And so we'll play that, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the project. Oh, that's coming up. Okay.
So in that project, there are some similar movements of the sound. So what you can try to see there in the first video is that the sound is following the people as they move, is moving in a helix-like fashion. And then in the Studio Museum version, the sound also moves between the speakers in a very similar way. It kind of surrounds you and it moves around you, although it's not moving you're not interrupting a beam in the same way, but it also has a similar movement.
So yeah, as Mendi said, the idea there was to create a double helix pattern with sound. And all the main sounds that you hear in there, the sound of Sally Hemings' bell being processed in different ways. And you're also hearing voices from people visiting Monticello and from tour guides at Monticello. So all the sounds are coming from the site itself. So we'll jump now to another project. In 2015, we did a project called Free Phase in Chicago, and Free Phase had a number of nodes to it, 3 different nodes. And one part of that project was a piece called Beacon. So Beacon was a sound piece that played from rooftops in the city of Chicago. And what we noticed is that in many cities around this country and around the world, you hear church bells or maybe a call to prayer, depending on what city that you're in. But in the US, we noticed that even though we have many African-American churches, we don't hear African-American music projected from architectural sites, not even from churches. And we're particularly interested in sort of this tradition of freedom songs, the political nature of African-American spirituals. So we kind of built our own sort of church bell in a way. And so we use a large parabolic speaker. That means a speaker that's making a narrow beam, like similar to the ones that we used in the earlier project. In order to, instead of projecting, a blanket of sound across the city, we projected sound into specific places. And we played phrases from freedom songs. These are the sort of reworkings of spirituals that were used in the 1960s as a part of the civil rights movement. We played phrases from freedom songs 3 times a day, morning, noon, and in the evening.
So the songs that we chose were songs that say something about those times of day. And this may be a question, a line of thought to follow up on later, but we were thinking about the fact that everything had to be placed into these songs, all kinds of information and temporal information. We know spiritual information, but political information, geographic information, temporal information, spatial information. And so we were thinking about what came along with the idea of morning, noon, and night.
So if we could play file 3A, that's a piece of Beacon. the installation at the Chicago Cultural Center, and next is a rebuilt foundation on the south side. So same project beacon, but two parts of the city.
Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Woke up this morning with my mind stayed on free.
We can stop it there. Thank you. We're working out our hand signals here. So a little bit about that to give you a little more context. You know, the sound that you heard sounded a little different, but we're just hearing it from kind of different perspectives. So the voices that you hear prominently in that second clip were also in the first one. You just couldn't hear quite from that side of the building. So, you know, the voices were coming out from the sides of the building. The bell sound was projected from the front. So, you know, we mentioned the different times of day. We should say that, you know, the voices you heard there were a group of students, music students at Columbia College that we work with to do vocals for that project. You know, I mean, we observed interesting things as we were working on that. One thing that we noticed is that people didn't quite respond to these things. People had a sense that these things were not exactly church bells, right? So I mean, you might notice that we made these things a little strange. So they're church bell-like, but they're altered. I mean, the sounds themselves are, you know, actually guitar harmonics, and obviously you don't usually have vocals along with church bells, and we noticed that when people recognize the songs, and many more people did recognize the songs, on the south side of Chicago, people sang along with it, you know, when they heard it. So, you know, we did know that people had a different sense of what these signals were.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because some of them extended it. So, you know, the piece ended and then people sang the rest of the lyrics, you know, walking down the street, which was, you know, an ideal thing for us. And a very different way of experiencing it than just hearing something in the distance.
And the piece that was at the Chicago Cultural Center, just to give you a little more context about where we were projecting in that area. So we were projecting our piece into Millennium Park, into an area with a lot of other public art projects. So the sculptor Anish Kapoor has a large silver object there that a lot of people call the beam. Mm-hmm. And I think Jaume Plenza has some sculptures there. So we really wanted to put, you know, this thing that people might assume was a church bell into the context with a lot of other public art works. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted people who were experiencing other kind of sculptures to walk into this sound sculpture that was happening in the space too.
Yeah. So we're probably going to move to the next project, but just to let you know that the other parts of this particular project, Free Phase, involved a video and sound work that used the sounds from the Edmund Pettus Bridge to reinterpret a song.
Yeah, the Edmund Pettus Bridge, for anyone who doesn't know, is in Selma, Alabama, right? Mm-hmm. It's the site of 1965's Bloody Sunday. So many of us, if you're not old enough to remember Bloody Sunday, I mean, you know, we were born right after that event, but we've seen it many times through, you know, black and white footage of the civil rights movement. And for those much younger than us, You might have seen Congressman John Lewis talk about this event. There's a commemoration around the time that we did this project where President Obama and John Lewis and many other people marched across that bridge again. So we mic'd that bridge, the structure itself, and took sounds from the architectural structure and used that to reinterpret the song "We Shall Overcome" in our own fashion as an installation. But I see somebody type a question, or a couple of questions in the chat here. First, someone said they'd love to know about the text and the narratives in both installations. I think this question came with the first project that we showed, American Cipher.
Should we answer this one?
Sure.
So we can answer this one.
So I just want to say the text that you saw on the wall there are a number of letterpress prints that were produced for American Cipher. And so there are original poems that kind of told different stories about DNA and the imagining of American citizenship.
So the language in the video Helix and the language in those prints were things that we created to consider that question of DNA.
Yeah. So you want to talk about Blue Speaker now or Number Station?
Let's go to Number Station.
Okay. So we're going to talk about a series of performances we've been doing in recent years that we call our Number Series. And I'll show you a quick image from that. So usually these performances are done in a gallery context. And these are performances that happen in real time, and then we leave the sound in the space. A recording of the performance, stays in the space as an installation. And so we've done 3 of these performances. I should say the 3 iterations of the project. We've performed it a couple of times. And these performances deal with databases related to violence. In the case of this first iteration, we did stop and frisk statistics from the NYPD.
And the second one, we did lynching statistics as they were recorded by Ida B. Wells Barnett in her book, The Red Record. And in the third one, we used the numbers from slave ship manifests. And so in each of these projects, we do a couple of things. We sonify the numbers in the database. And then we also perform them. And we don't say anything other than the numbers in those databases.
So to be clear, we're reading numbers from the database, and we're also generating sounds from those numbers as well. So you're hearing the actual numbers being turned into sound. So if we have a very small number, then you hear a low frequency sound, you hear a bassy sound. If we have a big number, then you hear a high frequency sound. So even as you're hearing us read it, you have some sense of the range of numbers in a given database. So John, if we could play file number 5, Number Station. Let me stop sharing here.
Stop.
Okay.
One.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that gives you a little sense of what the number stations performances are like. They're generally like anywhere from 30 to 50 minutes, depending on how much of a database that we're doing in a given performance. And as we said, there've been sort of three parts of the project so far, but we're still working with other databases. So that series is still ongoing. We're going to show, 2 more brief clips, and then we'll stop and engage with the questions. So most recently, we've been working with projects that deal with nature and science in different ways. One thing we've been working on are a group of projects about light. These projects also have a kind of social component to them too, but we'll get into that. Most recently, we did 2 projects at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. And both of these projects...
we did things after that too.
Both of these projects deal with different ways of thinking about light. First, we'll show you what we did in the inside of an architectural space there. A piece called Anyanwu, and then we'll show you some work that we did on the outside of the same structure. So you can see 2 different ways that we approach the space. So if we could play file 7, please.
Got the light of freedom. Got the light of freedom. Got the light of freedom. I have got the light of freedom. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. The light of freedom. Got the light of freedom. Got the light of freedom. I got the light of freedom. Gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine.
So that piece is called Anyanwu, and Anyanwu is the name of an Igbo sun deity. The name literally means eye of light. And so we were thinking about the question of internal light. So the idea that we learn a lot about from this song, this little light of mine, and that line that you hear in the song is extended, an extended version of that song, This Little Light of Mine. And then we also, used it, the image of eyes of women in the civil rights movement. So there are five banners, 5 of them, Ida B. Wells, Barnett, Diane Nash, Ella Baker, Claudette Colvin, and
Fannie Lou Hamer. Yeah, and so that song, This Little Light of Mine, which we reworked there, if you know the song, you might not recognize it from our reworking of it. You might recognize some of the lyrics, but Fannie Lou Hamer, the famous activist, was widely associated with that song. She really kind of brought that song to the civil rights movement. So that song, some people call it a spiritual. Many people know it as a song that children might sing in church, but Fannie Lou Hamer really made it a song associated with the movement. And so we're really fascinated by this idea of these heroes of the movement having a kind of internal light. And so we really wanted to put that in relationship with the way light enters an architectural space, how light enters the body of a structure. And so, we're using these kind of translucent banners to show the eyes of these heroes of the movement, and also trying to sort of make the sound in the space sort of parallel that translucency. And so the sound that you hear there, first you heard the dry sound, the direct recording, and then it cross-faded into the way things sounded in the space. And so the sound, if you heard it in the space, it sounded like it was emanating from the banners itself. So we built the sound into the structure that the banners were hanging from. So it filled the space, but from those specific eyes of those people. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to show you what we did on the outside of that space. And this is a performance that we did during the same period at the site. And this is called Book of Light. And we'll talk more about that after we show the video, but it's file 6, please.
Sheds her name after the darkness slides away. I see the light finally break, singing me out to take their rest. I see the blue of light on the crest. Feel the curve flow. Magic may come down. Hear the high winds blow. Sunlight to make shadow. Sunlight is the bow and arrow.
100 years from now, how are people going to be talking about the struggle for freedom? Because I don't think we're ever going to get there. I don't think we will ever reach a point where we can say we are free, right? We can rest. We can stop now.
When he realized that moonlight was surrounding him, he summoned all his powers to raise an army of the dead. One by one, the ogre took each soldier and smashed his hands with a mallet until the bruised and swollen hands grew to the size of cold, blue mountains. We learned she was beloved before we learned she disrupted lives. She turned her nation's gaze away from its gods and lifted its face to the sun.
So we should clarify that. I mean, what you saw in that was, you saw excerpts from a 1-hour performance. So that was an outdoor sound and light show where the projections and the music were being done sort of in real time. So, it was maybe a 2.5-3 minute excerpt from the 1-hour piece. Mm-hmm. So the idea there is that the images, a lot of those images came from some work we were doing with the lab that works on biophotons. So cellular light emission is what we were interested in. So we were looking at light emitted by cells in the body. And we're talking about tiny, tiny bits of light, photons that can only be seen with specialized equipment.
Signaling.
Cellular signaling.
Yeah.
But those things kind of inspired the images that we ultimately produced in the projections. And then we made a number of stories and poems that dealt with light to go with those things, stories, poems, and songs. And so that's what you heard as you were looking at those images projected onto the building. And so we did that performance around this time last year. It was last November.
It was November, yeah.
Yeah, on a very cold day outside.
Yes.
I think it's like 22 degrees or something. So we thought it'd be interesting to, sound and light shows are typically done in the summertime. We thought, let's try it, in the winter in Pittsburgh. So it was a fun experience. So we'll stop there in terms of presenting the projects, but it looks like, people have asked a couple of interesting questions that we want to get into. I see that one person asked, said, do you wonder that the medium of sound in public spaces without text or words to communicate ideas about politics, history, religion, et cetera, is too subtle? That's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What say you?
Well, I mean, I would say that, we have a different goal from someone who would be communicating about, the question disappeared. It's different. Okay. For someone who would be communicating, it's a learning system, to lecture about history, politics, religion. For us, we are trying to experience what the sounds hold, the information the sounds hold, or, as Keith said to me earlier, to change the air
Yeah, I mean, you could think about the way music normally affects us, even the way architecture affects us. I mean, these things all have belief systems, philosophies embedded in them. But they're just part of how we experience a site, right? And so sound and architecture, these things, they do affect the air, but it is a subtle. It is subtle. It is a subtle way of working. Yeah. I think that's what we like about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that people often think about this with material, with objects, with especially old objects, right? But we don't often think consciously about the fact that our ephemeral inheritance is also holds, information in it. Let's see. I mean, Terry, were you going to give us the questions, or should we?
Yeah. Well, I'm happy. You're doing such a good job. I hate to jump in because you're doing a great job, but I'm happy to take that on. That is what I'm getting paid for. So, okay. So,
we're fascinated. What are they saying?
Yeah, I know. I see that. Abby Chung says your work is fascinating. What projects are you thinking about for the future? And without getting political, how about a piece or two in Washington, D.C.? Possibly you have already done work there.
We have ideas.
We have plenty of ideas. So we presented, like the DNA project that we started out with, we presented, not an exhibition, but, we presented that at the Smithsonian, but we haven't done we have lots of public project ideas for DC that hopefully we'll get to soon. We just need to, find the right partner to do those things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question.
Yeah,
I think we would all vote for that. Speaking of, everybody go vote. Let's see. Chris Wicker, do you see your sound operating as an object in the space that you're working in? Hearing you both talk about your sound work, seeing how it inhabits a space, creates a shape, etc., is interesting.
Thank you. I don't know if I think about it as an object. I think about it more as like it's not even right to say a color, it's a part of the space, and it changes, it's acting on the space. it's different. Like sound, part of the reason why we like working in this medium is that it operates kind of differently. It's like it in a way can be something that acts on you without you thinking about it, and in other ways it can be very, very present. So it's unlike other things because it can be both. It can make itself felt, and it can also not call attention to itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say part of the reason we work with some of the other materials we work with, meaning like working with architecture or light and stories, is because at times sound acts like each of those things. Like sometimes you're dealing with sound that feels very much like an architectural presence, right? Like you can walk through a wall of sound and you feel like you're walking into a physical wall. You can feel it. Sometimes it does have an object-like quality, and other times it's particle-like light, right? And other times it's mainly just triggering a memory, like a story. Mm-hmm. And so at different times, depending on the way it's being used, it can be like those different things. That's part of why we like working with it so much.
Oh, that's very interesting. How about with the equipment? Knowing a little bit about the source of that question, maybe. I think maybe there also might be a curiosity about, how you make decisions about what the mechanisms of those sounds are. Like, what are the kind of the just, practical decisions you make about that, and then do they become part of the work, or are they strictly a means to an end? Do you have any thoughts on that, or is it different per project?
Can you say?
I think more.
Can I riff on that a little bit? Because actually, that was actually had a question in how I read the tech apparatus in your work. So without stating how I read it, maybe I am like leading in the question. I was wondering if you guys, if the black body is present in your work, and if I read sort of the tech as like a stand-in, like the black speaker, the black parrot. So is this something that you guys think about? Do you guys think about the black body in your in work where you're using this sort of ephemeral material as your base?
Do we think about the speakers as a body? No.
Is that what you meant? The speakers as a body? Yeah.
Or just is the black body present in your work?
I mean, in general,
the black body.
In all of our glorious blackness, we are sometimes working, sometimes we're not. It depends on the project. It is a body.
I think the answer is no. I think, outside, I think our bodies are sometimes an important part of it, not just because we're sometimes performing, but just like we do a lot of things, involve a lot of negotiations, sometimes with a lot of people, a lot of partners in the process. And that is where the fact that we are manifesting in what you might call black bodies has a really big role in what it takes for the thing to happen, right? But I don't know that we are representing black bodies. I think we are doing something else in relation to black peoples, African peoples, kind of artifacts. I don't even know if artifact is the word.
Well, I mean, what Mendi talked about at the beginning is that when we're working with things from the African-American canon of music or sound creation, we understand that like these things that we're working with have had to carry all kinds of information, philosophy, cosmology, ideas about architecture, right? So very few sort of built artifacts exist from African-American culture. So the music has had to hold everything. And so part of what we see ourselves doing is kind of decoding that and unpacking that, right? So if there are architectural ideas built into the history of African-American music, how do you unpack that in a physical space? How do you give people some sense? So I would say we're not always thinking about the Black body, but we're thinking about African American cultural ideas, African cosmologies, and philosophy, built into things that, seem like spirituals. We think we know what these things are about. We say, okay, that's taken from a Bible verse and people made a nice little song from it, but these things actually tell us things about space and time.
And I think the ways that they've been reinterpreted, particularly in the 60s, I knew for a long time, for example, that like the word Jesus was transformed to the word freedom when activists started singing these songs that were spirituals. But what I didn't know is a lot of that was happening inside churches, right? So they were sitting in the pews of a church, having a political meeting, taking the word Jesus out of the songs. And I'm like, well, what? How did they understand all of this, right? Like that changed my view of what they had always thought these songs to do, right? And mean, like they were always meaning, they must have always been meaning multiple things if that could happen in a church, So, there's just...
But also to that question, when you ask it, I thought, no, it's not about the body. But then I'm thinking about all these relationships now. Definitely we have thought a lot about singers during the Civil Rights Movement who said that they use sound to extend the reach of the body, right? Bernice Johnson Reagan, who famously led Sweet Honey in the Rock, she often talks about sound extending the body, right? And so we're definitely thinking about that. That shaped our, let's say wanting to work with these parabolic speakers that project the beam of sound. So how do you, extend your reach beyond even a specific building?
And the fact that you could walk like this in the beam of the sound and then walk out and miss it. You come back to, what did I just walk out of? These things are, the body is implied, Blackness is everywhere in our work, but I think how we arrive at it is not in a straight line,
Even when the sound is,
and we don't always, when we go into say we're going to think about spatial information in this song or temporal information in this song, we don't always know so that we can arrive at the Black body, even though it might be there,
So another question is,
Okay.
I'm sorry, are you on?
Well, no, let me riff off of one more thing. So, so going from that, I'm not going to give my opinion, but there's like this, interesting, like the disembodiment implies the body, like you said, like the ephemeral sort of the culture coming through, we know it comes through people. And I'm always fascinated between this discourse of the Black body, Black people, Blackness, these sort of separate categories that are all the same. But I wanted to know in terms of how you utilize data, like historical data and artifacts, if you see the act of interpreting, unpacking as some sort of, I don't know, conjuring, like conjuring, I'm thinking about the Hemmings bell, right? Like what it means to touch that. And then to produce sound in this moment. I don't know. I'm really interested in those sorts of things. Do you guys think about those things?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what we can say about it, but we definitely think about it. Sound is always, kind of conjuring, Yeah.
And then the data has, it implies sort of like the opposite of conjuring, and so for us, we've said a million times that what we're trying to do with data is to, when we use data in our work, we want to help people feel it, and so I think it's just saying that is a type of conjuring, especially because it seems cold, and so we're looking for where it's not cold.
So if the NYPD puts out numbers related to hundreds or thousands of stops over a given period. The idea is to it's a data dump to keep you from feeling things, right? So you don't notice the one person here or the one person there. You get all these numbers and you're supposed to just be overwhelmed by the information. But we're trying to unpack these things from police violence to lynching statistics to help you feel, individual numbers.
And there's a lot that's missing, right? And there's a lot that's lied about, and so for us, stripping away even a lot of the details we do know to the numbers and trying to feel that is how we have to, when we do that, it calls up all these ways. How could we feel this? That's the question as we go into a performance. And so in asking that question, we learn to feel things that we did not know that we were going to, places we didn't know we were going to go, we have to learn it in the practice. So it turns out to be, a kind of conjuring,
Well, and with the piece where you're with the data, where you're reading the data, I was interested in the fact that you sat across from each other, not directly across, but across. That had to be a very conscious decision because it's a whole different thing if you're sitting behind the table delivering that information, but that information passing kind of past each other, like back and forth across that table, that just seemed really significant.
Yeah. We've tried it different ways, and we might try some other things, but we tried different things, and it does feel, quite different. So we tried it facing each other. We tried it off center. Yeah.
I think interestingly, I don't know if this is going to make sense, but what the sound is doing seems most like that sitting on opposite sides of the table, that kind of crossing. But no, that's not the sound. But that image is mirrored in other parts of the project. That's what I'm trying to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, Lauren, I do not want to interrupt you. Do you have more to say? Okay. You jump in anytime. This is your party. I'm just reading questions. So someone is asking what attracted you to begin working with sound, which is a big question. But do you recall that? What the original?
Well, I mean, we'll say that we started out with separate practices before working together, right? So, I was working as a musician and doing visual work separately, like played in bands, worked in hip hop, and was making video art as a completely separate thing, and then those things started to come together for me. Mendi was working as a writer separately, and then our practices kind of merged and we started making things together for the internet. So that's how our collaboration first started. And as we moved back into physical spaces, sound seemed like a really interesting place to work.
Yeah, we both, it's hard to say, when did we start working with sound? As children, did we, it's hard to figure out, there was a long period of starting to work with sound, and so the answer might be different along that period, but it was always there.
Yeah.
So a question from Zotina. Has Black Lives Matter and the death of George Floyd informed any of your recent work? Not that it should necessarily. It takes time to digest recent events in order to say or do something impactful.
Well, I mean, what people are talking about with Black Lives Matter, I guess depending on how you look at it, people might be talking about state violence against Black people or human rights issues. I mean, these are things that we've always been thinking about and talking about. These are things that Black people in America have always been talking about. So yes and no, we've always been thinking and talking about these things. Recent events do affect us, I guess, like they affect everyone else.
No, maybe.
Yeah. So, because there's so much going on in the world, from Black Lives Matter to everyone dealing with coronavirus. Mendi mentioned this piece Low we did. We recently did this sleep piece, like an overnight work, an 8-hour piece. Some of that is because, when these things go on, when people hit the streets, the language used in the media is unrest, right? People talk about unrest a lot, and we've been unrested forever. So we want people, even as we push to change this culture and to change the world, we want people to remember to rest. Yeah.
That's a lovely idea. I love that unrest. Something that occurred to me when I was watching, and my apologies if that I should maybe know this, but I was wondering, do you have any publications of your work? Yeah?
Yeah, we have a couple. Well, I mean, things that we've written and also things written about us, but you mean things we've...
I'm talking about, that you've written or that reflects your work,
Yeah. Let's see. We did this opera masquerade years ago, sort of music theater performance for Electric Ghost. We made a book from that, some 1913 press. One of our Americana suites, Big House Disclosure. There's a book that came out related to that project.
Mm-hmm.
We just did a book we just talked, when was that, Friday or something? Yeah, Friday. we just made a small book for a project that we started. You're grabbing it? Yeah, it's
right here.
Probably on the table. That's a project called Spinner. And so we work with a marine scientist, Kelly Benoit Bird, who she did a study on spinner dolphins. And we're kind of making a piece inspired by how spinner dolphins survive. So we're interested in how they...
It'll be a sound installation, but this book is a kind of emotional mapping of where of what we learned from the dialogue in order to go into that.
Did you say emotional mapping?
Yeah.
Nice. Well, that's what I was wondering, is how you how you formatted sound for a publication. That's why it occurred to me. It's like, I wonder how that plays in a publication. Oh, that sounds nice.
Yeah, sometimes we've done graphic scores, but usually, all the projects, whether a book comes out of them or not, start out, with poems. The poems are the sketches usually.
Oh, nice.
Even if they don't end up in the installation or whatever. So the poems are how we sketch.
Oh, okay. I'm really glad we got to that. That's a nice note. And I have loads of notes from y'all. I'll probably be getting in touch to clarify some things. This was beautiful. Lauren, did you have anything else you wanted to say or ask?
I mean, you know me. I can hold people hostage. I'm not. I'll take it offline. I don't want to keep being like.
We can go. I don't know.
I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, I'm just super interested. I mean, I think like this goes a little bit around to the question of, producing works that are in response to our political moment, but also I'm back to the Black body part, because I think what's so interesting is like you guys have produced work that is not commodifiable, right? Like it's not objects that are bought and sold, which is always like an issue when we're talking about like work that is on these topics, right? Like it's like the sort of contradiction of what it means to make work on history, on the state of being, on Blackness and all that. And then we put it back into the marketplace to sell, right? So that's why I'm super interested in just like the lack of the body or represented in your work, but then it is there because it's there it's there to me in like the tech apparatuses, like somehow stand in. That's how I read the work. So just like as a sort of, I don't know, like a methodology, am I saying that right? A methodology of sort of navigating these sort of socio-political, socio-cultural, but also just like something beyond all that too, because I was talking to a friend today and I was just like, I don't know, that like the work just feels like black as fuck to me. It's like black, like, right? It's like there's something beyond all, like it's, and that's why I guess I got to like the whole Conjuring thing, because I feel like there's like an arrangement of elements. You're using this material that like points to Black death, points to freedom struggle, points to this constant condition, but then it produces or transcends into something else, into this other realm of feeling that I feel like sound gets us to, right? That in a way that like visual practices don't. So I just rambled. It wasn't a question, just like thoughts put out there, like, let's talk about Black body and like, you know, techno culture. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just super fascinated. I you know, look forward to the day I can be in the presence of work, because so much of what I'm interested in with sound and public space and all that kind of stuff, like, you know, yeah, just I'm interested and fascinated.
I definitely think that your work is something you need to be there for. And I'm glad we got to sort of get a sense of it here. And I appreciate Lauren for having the wherewithal to make the invitation, because I think that this gives us something else to look forward to when we can like travel again and we can be places and we can be in these spaces. And I think there is no way within 45 minutes or whatever we've given ourselves that we could possibly scrape the surface of this, which I know is part of Lauren's frustration. It's like, there's more, and there always will be. Like, I don't think we'd ever reach the bottom of this very deep and rich well. So thank you so much. Thank you, Lauren. This was fantastic. Mendi and Keith, it was amazing. I knew it would be, but you surpassed all expectations. I can't wait, like Lauren says, to see the work. And before we say goodnight to everyone, please note that we will be here next week with Nikki Finney, thanks to the artist Annette Lawrence, who has invited the poet Nikki Finney to be with us. So I hope you'll come back and join us for that. Again, thank you to everyone for being here. This was amazing. It's such a bright spot and sometimes a dark time. So I appreciate that you guys came and shone a little light on everything. And to all of you who joined us tonight, thank you so much for being here. Yeah, that was lovely. I know you share my feelings on that. So thank you.
Thank you all.